This week kicks off our 2025 positional rankings. We've hit the top 12 quarterbacks. Today, we're here to mine some big value out of our quarterbacks 13 through 24. Let's get it. What's up, fantasy people? You are back with the True North Fantasy Pod. We're here to inform, empower, and entertain you towards making sound fantasy decisions. I am Trav. I'm hosting, and I'm West Coasting here in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia. As is customary, I am joined by the Italian stallion, the cannoli kid, grazie, Mr. Frank Amaranti. Frank, it's never going to stop, brother. It's never going to stop.
I love it. I love it, and can't wait to get into QB's 13 to 24. There's a lot of values here. I like waiting on QB this year, so I'm excited to talk about a lot of these passers.
Yeah, I think these are the guys who are probably going to be residing on my fantasy teams for the most part, Frank, because like we said, the risk reward, the value that you get on them when you take position players in the top rounds. I love it. Anybody who's watching or listening, please subscribe and follow. We are on YouTube and on your favorite audio platforms. Leaving a comment just warms our heart. It also helps the algorithm to know that people like watching our stuff. So please show some love that way. And of course, find our social media accounts in the episode description. Frank, we're talking quarterbacks 13 through 24. We're not going to waste any time on this new format of the True North Fantasy Pod. So this is our second episode this week. If you missed it, quarterbacks 1 through 12, we ran through earlier in the week. A bit of a new format for the True North Fantasy Pod, trying to make the episodes more digestible for the people, but adding more value with multiple episodes per week. So these quarterbacks we're talking about today, Frank, I think it's a big, messy group is kind of what some of my notes say. There's a lot of guys that I like in here, a lot of guys that I'm not so bullish on in here, which I think is interesting. But essentially, these are guys that we can draft a little bit later and try and mine some of that value on. We're going to talk a little bit about our philosophy around this group. I think we've already touched on that in the previous episode and kind of how we want to attack these guys in drafts, Frank. So looking at this group, you've already mentioned it. Like, these guys are the guys that if you're waiting on quarterback, which you said is a strategy that you are going to be taking this year, you want to kind of attack. And so I mentioned it's a big, messy group, Frank. Does that mean that there's like less value here? Or would you say that that means the pockets of value are maybe just a little bit bigger? What's the risk reward like? What are your overall thoughts on ranking this group, quarterback 13 through 24? Because it was tougher for me than the top 12.
Oh, it's definitely tough. I think the priority here is on upside, the ones that you think they could really be a major win. The toughest for me to rank were the pocket passers who have had coming off strong seasons, like a Jared Goff. I know I don't want to draft these types because, if a lot of Goff's production came when the Lions had a lot of injuries on defense, forced them into shootouts. Like, I'd rather swing for the fence on someone who runs a little bit. So these were the type of players that were hardest for me to rank for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of harder to find that rushing. And so when you find it in here, you cherish it. Yeah, very, very, very difficult group because, you got those pocket guys who, without the rushing, it's really hard to find a bigger return on the investment like you can with the rushing guys. But those rushing guys often come with a more volatile floor to where by season's end, if they've been giving you some 6-point games, that pocket passer coming out in the wash might have had a better season because he was just giving you that consistent 19, whereas the Russian guy was, 6 one week, 35 the next. And so really interesting to group to talk about here. And there's one guy that presents some significant rushing upside, obviously, and we'll get to him. But I can talk about my first tier here, Frank, because the top guy is a guy that you had in your top 12 on our previous episode, and that's Baker Mayfield. He's my quarterback 13 right now on Underdog. He's going as the quarterback 7, and I think you had him as the quarterback 7 as well, if I recall. I just see so many opportunities for downside in Baker that I just couldn't get him into that top 12. I know he did it last year. I know he's a number 1 overall pick previously, but I also can't avoid the fact that we have seen a lot of boneheadedness out of Baker Mayfield previously. He has made terrible mistakes in the past that have killed his teams, lost his team's games. And I don't think he's 100% that guy, but I don't think that guy can just be pushed by the wayside altogether because it's a bit of that gunslinger mentality that's in him. And last year, that gunslinger mentality buoyed him to that top 10 finish with 40 something touchdowns last year, Frank. And so the hard thing for me is that if we're taking Baker as a top 7, top 8 quarterback, we're banking on him having that same touchdown upside again. And we're banking on him having almost a flawless decision making season like he had in 2024, which we hadn't really previously seen from him. So, all of that, along with the fact that we've got a new offensive coordinator in Josh Grizzard, who we think will probably take up the mantle of Liam Cohen in some of that creativity, but we're not 100% sure. And you mentioned it on last week's episode or last episode this week, that Tristan Wirfs injury is bigger than we think, man. Like Tristan Wirfs is one of the best tackles in the NFL, and him not protecting that blind side for Baker Mayfield is going to be a huge hit for the offensive line. So I love everything, and I'm ready to be wrong on this one because if Baker succeeds, I'd be happy because I think him succeeding is good for the NFL. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Emeka Egbuka, Jalen McMillan, love all of them. Bucky, Rashad White, love all of them. So I kind of want to be wrong on this one, Frank, but I can't keep that stuff out of my head because I think his history of not performing to last year's level is much longer than last year. So that's why I have Baker at 13. Trevor Lawrence comes in at my quarterback 14, Frank. I think everything around him, like he gets Baker Mayfield's offensive coordinator in Liam Cohen. You got Travis Hunter as the wide receiver 2 and Brian Thomas solidified as the wide receiver 1. Of course, he's got Travis Etienne and Bashal Tutin as guys that can be pass catchers in the backfield. And I think we've seen this kind of quarterback 12 through 16 from Trevor Lawrence previously when he had some things in his way or in place. Sorry. I think we've seen him perform to a good level even when he had things not in place. And so, with that solidification around the offense, I think Liam Cohen's going to maximize Trevor Lawrence. And so I have him as quarterback 14. Quarterback 15 was really tough for me, Frank, and this is the end of the tier for me. Justin Herbert, he goes as the quarterback 17 on underdog, so I'm not hugely low or high on him at all. It's just kind of right around where I think he's going to be. He doesn't run as much as I think is in his skill set. I think we could see him being one of those 500 to 600 yard quarterbacks, but he just doesn't necessarily do it. This team wants to run the ball heavy, especially in the red zone. I know they added pass catching weapons in Trey Harris, and Mike Williams actually retired. So shout out to Mikey Dubs. Quentin Johnston looking good in camp right now as well. And so I don't know. I just don't see them going pass heavy enough to where I can get Justin Herbert up to that level, despite the fact that I think he's as talented as like Josh Allen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm concerned about. I don't really take Herbert because they just want to run the ball. They've invested first round pick Omarion Hampton. They're going to lean on the defense and running game. Herbert will have his moments, but in a season long perspective, I don't really see that top 8 type of upside.
Okay, Frank, why don't you fire off with your tier 1?
Yeah, so we finished QBs 1 to 12 last episode, and 9 to 12 is in a tier, but also 13 to 15 are in that same tier with me. I made it a boomer bust group. 13 was Bo Nix. We talked about him. I feel like like I said earlier, out of all the sophomore quarterbacks, you could see a sophomore slump from him. 14, I'm putting JJ McCarthy. He got
Nice.
his ADP is QB 16 on underdog, and I wanted to be above consensus on McCarthy. And it's really because he runs a little bit. He's with an elite coach, and he has an alpha receiver one. We've seen what Kevin O'Connell has done with quarterbacks. I mean, look what Sam Darnold did with him last year. So I want to be a high on McCarthy, and so I have him QB 14 there, slightly above his ADP. QB 15, I agree with you, Trevor Lawrence. I think Liam Cohen can finally unlock him. Obviously, Brian Thomas is a stud, and then Travis Hunter could be a stud receiver too. So that'd be a hell of a combo if it works out. So I wanted to be higher on Lawrence as well than his ADP, which is QB 19. I have Lawrence QB 15. So that rounds out the tier. And then I have from 16 to 21 another tier of more of like floor types with low upside. You want me to go through all of them or
Yeah, why don't you go through your tier
Okay.
and then I'll compare mine to that one. So we're both at
Okay.
16 right now, I think.
Okay, so QB 16, I got Jordan Love. I wanted to be slightly above his QB 18 ADP because Love played injured last season and he's presumably healthy now with more time healing. They used the first rounder Marcus Golden. We saw what Love did in his first year as a starter. I like him there as QB 16. I'm low on Brock Purdy, QB 17, even though he's produced. It's just he doesn't really run. And Debo's gone. Ayuk coming off the ACL. I know there were injuries last year. It just these pocket QBs. I'm just rather swinging for the fence because I know, especially in a redraft league, they're easily replaceable. QB 18, Jared Goff. I think the Lions defense will be better now that it's healthier, and obviously losing Ben Johnson hurts. QB 19, I'd be willing to move Herbert up a little bit, but I have him here. He just hasn't really produced from a season long points per game aspect. And like we said, I think the Chargers will be run heavy. QB 20, CJ Stroud. I think he could get going again, but I have to factor in just how bad he was in fantasy last year. And the offensive line concerns with Laramie Tunsil traded hurt as well. QB 21 is Tua, even though I don't necessarily see, these are the types that are hard for me to rank because they
Yeah.
have a track record that they really outproduce this price, but you're not excited about them because they just don't run. And the Dolphins' offense could legit be really trending downward, with Tyreek Hill on decline, offensive line concerns. But with that said, it's hard not to put Tua there because he's done it in the past, and McDaniel's still a good coach. But I'm not particularly excited about taking Tua. I usually if I have him, it's in a best ball where I took Waddle earlier or Achan or Hill.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if I'm looking at QB, I'd just rather wait and go with like Penix, but I grouped him in another tier, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, no, I like it. Some guys that I'm not quite as high on. I got Kyler at 16. So I've talked about how I'm a little bit down on him. I think his passing ceiling is just terrible. He's not a guy who's going to throw for much more than 22-ish touchdowns, and he's not the guy who's giving you 800 rushing yards anymore. And so I'm fading Kyler a little bit despite his recent finishes. Jared Goff's as quarterback 17 for me, a little bit, maybe just a touch lower than or higher than you. I think he's just that serviceable, super valuable, going to give you 20 every week kind of guy, but not going to do much over top of that. And his way to exceeding the 17 ranking is a big touchdown season, and I think we might even see a little bit of regression in that area from Goff. Quarterback 18 for me is JJ McCarthy. He was probably one of my tougher guys to rank here, Frank, just because the range could be so wide. He is a rookie quarterback who has never thrown a pass, and I love attaching to the situation around him. I love attaching to Kevin O'Connell, but we can't deny the fact that this is a guy who's never thrown a pass in the NFL. So I think regardless of where we have him ranked, like that's going to be a bit of a risk. Tua is my quarterback 19, Frank, and that's assuming health. Obviously, he's the guy who you feel like the bottom could fall out at any given moment. And the bottom falling out for him isn't just missing the season. The bottom falling out for him is that he doesn't play anymore ever. And so that's the scary thing about Tua, but you can't deny the upside. He's been like a top 10 quarterback whenever he's been healthy with McDaniel and these pass catching weapons. And those guys are all still there. So Brock Purdy's my quarterback 20. I made a bit of a face when you said you were low on him, Frank, because I'm a little bit lower on Brock Purdy. Had that big contract, but I think he's set up to disappoint. Doesn't have necessarily a healthy Brandon Ayuk to start this season. Doesn't have Debo Samuel, who is an incredible safety blanket. Christian McCaffrey's coming back full health, and so he's going to be a focal point of this offense as well. So I think Purdy is set to become one of those streamer plus guys for the next few seasons, despite that big contract that he had. Matthew Stafford comes in at 21, Frank, and he was another really hard guy to rank because I think what I'm betting on here is a big touchdown season from him. You're never going to get rushing out of Matthew Stafford, but I think Devontae Adams being replaced for Cooper Kupp is nice because he gives you everything that Kupp gave you, and he gives you a lot more by way of being an X receiver as well, being a red zone threat as well. And so I think things could be set up for Matt Stafford to have a big touchdown season. Jordan Love is one who I think is interesting, and we should probably talk about throughout the offseason as it progresses because I have him at quarterback 22, and I'm not that high on him, but you being high on him, as well as my other co-host on my other show, Jax Falcone, being high on him, it makes me start to kind of ponder whether I might be wrong on this one. So I'm going to reassess that quarterback 22 ranking for Jordan Love. It's just the week to week consistency hasn't necessarily been there. And I feel like he hasn't, like he did have that one good year of putting the ceiling together, but I just wonder if that might be the best season he ever has. Quarterback 23, Bryce Young. We talked about our bullishness a little bit on the Panthers offense. I think Bryce Young, quarterback 23 isn't an otherworldly ranking or anything like that. So I think Bryce Young sneaks into that top 24 with some better weapons, and my trust in Dave Canales. Rounding it out, the old dog, Geno Smith as quarterback 24, Frank. I think he's going to have a nice insulated offense with Bowers and Jacoby Myers there, as well as Ashton Genty. And he's just not going to be in a position to make very many mistakes. And I think he's going to take advantage of that for, like, you know, being that quarterback 24 who you're not super excited about, but gives you startable weeks. Probably isn't going to be the quarterback that you draft as your QB1 in the draft, but a guy that you can keep an eye on as a streamer if you wait and get one of these guys that you might have to drop. Say you draft Jordan Love and he has a shitty start to the season, you could drop him and pick up a Geno Smith for sure. So, Frank, we're going to keep this one a little bit short. Of course, we did have a good episode on the first one, and we're trying to keep these digestible for the people. Any comments on the guys that I had in there before we move into the rapid fire section?
Yeah, so when I did say I was low on Purdy, it's because he goes QB 11 and
That's
underdog.
insane to me.
So we're both very low on him, but I
Yeah,
get it for sure. And I'm lower on Stafford just because I know it is an upgrade with Adams over what we
I
saw
see it
from Cup
though. You're
last
right.
year. It's just that Stafford's points per game the last couple years has been consistently in the 20s, and it's like they run Kyron a lot in the red zone. So given that Stafford doesn't run at all, I put him in another tier called boring veterans, where it's just Stafford, Smith, and like Darnold and Rodgers. But I could see the appeal, like with the good supporting cast, maybe he gets the touchdowns going, and
He's at the top of
Smith
that tier,
isn't
right?
a
He's probably at
scout.
the top of that tier.
Yeah, yeah, he is. Because I put a tier above them where I'm, again, swinging for the fence. This tier is called Intriguing and Unproven. So
I like
QB
it.
22, Michael Penix. It's just because, first round draft capital, good supporting cast with Bijan and London. He has a good schedule in the fantasy playoffs, faces the Bucks, among others.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could get better as the season goes along, and it's a swing for the fence. QB 23, Bryce Young, we talked about him. He looked good down the stretch. McMillan there as an alpha receiver one. But I didn't want to go too high on Bryce Young just because we have a track record where he wasn't good. So, like, we have to consider that risk in his profile. And then QB 24 is a total swing for the fence on the first overall pick in Cam Ward.
I
And
like
it's
that.
really just because think about CJ Stroud's rookie year. He would. It just goes to show what the high end QB prospect could do. They could really surprise you. So if Cam Ward is, you know, if he's actually good and lives up to that billing as a first overall pick, he could be that type of volume pocket passer that elevates his teammates, and he's someone you could make a bet on in best ball where you make a tight end stack getting one of their rookies like that they drafted this year, Ayomanor and whoever else. If I said that right, my bad if I didn't. I
Canadian, by
just
the
think
way.
it just reminds me of it just ranking him and emphasizing the upside and what if he's way better than everyone thinks, like similar to CJ Stroud was. Because remember, Stroud coming his rookie year, like people liked him, but like they weren't so high on him in fantasy. They weren't that excited, and he just blew the doors off projections. So I'm taking that into account with my Cam Ward rank.
Yeah, I like those similarities that you draw there. And I think we talked about it on the last episode. Will Levis did get that shoulder injury. And so there's almost nothing to speak of as far as backup quarterbacks. And so he is going to be the starter and he's going to get the shot as he should as the number one overall pick. So that's really Good there. And I think what this all kind of illustrates, Frank, is that like from quarterback 16 to like quarterback 30 is all a bit of a crapshoot. And so this is where it goes into that stuff that I say at the top of the show, where we're here to kind of inform, empower, and entertain. We can give you information, we can give you our opinions and what we think you should do. But one of our big goals on this show is to give you information to be able to make your own decisions and help you be able to feel confident in your own fantasy decisions, right? And so while we may have different ranks, we both aren't like scoffing at the ranks because we understand that this is the range of rankings where it's really anyone's guess. And, you know, at a baseline, we all are not necessarily experts in this in any way, especially with the quarterback position because it's so hard to pin down. So, just a couple rapid fires here, Frank. Who was your? I mentioned a couple of mine as we went through. Who was your hardest guy to rank within your top 24 or your 13 to 24?
Before I get into that, I just
Yeah,
want to add to what you were just saying in that think about what it would look like if you're right and that this player beats expectations. So like Cam Ward, I was saying, what would it look like if we're right and he gives you a profit at ADP? Well, that means probably not only Calvin Ridley is helpful in best ball. Maybe one of those other receivers are, and then those players are very easy to pair with Cam Ward, so you can really put your best ball team over the edge in that way, or in redraft in the bench stash. But that's a good way to think of it too. But who was hardest to rank here? I think the hardest thing for me here was putting the veterans lower outside of the top 24, like Stafford and Geno were really good in real life. It's just that I was looking at swinging for the fence on the youth, and but that I could easily see Stafford being ranked as high as like QB 17 or something. So I understand it. It's just personal preference. Given what he's done recently and given how run heavy the Rams are. And I think Geno, the Raiders will run a lot with Genti, and I don't know if there'll be this prolific touchdown
right.
offense for him. And it's not like he runs that much. So guys like that, that's why I put them lower. That was a challenge though, because I could easily see those veterans really beating that rank.
Yeah, no, I think if we think about it, like making that bet on the youth and the upside is probably the right move there because upside's going to win you championships, right? Like these guys are not going to win you championships. These older vets who don't run the ball, they're actually just going to kind of buoy your team and hopefully the guys that you drafted in those top rounds where you didn't take quarterbacks supplement what you're missing at that quarterback position, but not always an easy one to hit on, Frank. So lastly, we're just going to talk about a couple of names, maybe outside of your top 24, that we should look for this season. So I'll start. You mentioned Michael Penix. He just missed the top 24 for me. He's my quarterback 25. I love all the pieces around him, and he's liable to move up even this offseason before the season starts. And so I love that. He's that pocket passer, but we've seen him be so prolific in college that we want to see a bit of that in the NFL. Jackson Dart is one for me as well, Frank, because he's not going to have like a season long finish necessarily, but when he gets in there, I think he could show as kind of a top 18 per game quarterback. He's one of those guys kind of similar to Bo Nix, who we can probably expect as a full time starter, 300 to 500 rushing yards. And so, really like Jackson Dart. And it feels gross, Frank, but Anthony Richardson always needs to be kept an eye on because if he is getting starting snaps, he is probably a top 12 quarterback as opposed to outside the top 24. So just three names who have some upside outside of my top 24. Do you like any of those and any that you would add?
Yeah, I totally see the case for each of those. A Rich obviously has done it before from a fantasy perspective. Jackson Dart gets to throw it with Malik Neighbors. Maybe he runs a little bit. And then your other one was Penix, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I already spoke about him. But for me, and these are only best ball types of takes. One is Daniel Jones. Maybe he can do better with Shane Steichen, who's been good with quarterbacks. The supporting cast is good. Jones runs. So it looks like he's in the driver's seat to be the week one starter. So taking a shot at him, I don't mind. Tyler Shuck.
Ooh.
What did we hear all draft that he only went low because of the age? Well, let's see. Maybe they were right and everyone else who's hating on Shuck because of the age is wrong. It's a contrarian move that I only like in best ball as my QB3. I like drafting Chris Olave a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So getting Shuck could be like a contrarian move and goes really late, especially in drafters format where you have couple extra roster spots compared to underdog. So having three quarterbacks is good, and taking a shot on Shuck makes sense. And plus, hey, He's got Kellen Moore as coach. But again,
Mhm.
this is not redraft. You're not taking Shuck there. This
Totally.
is just best ball.
Totally, yeah.
And finally, this one is someone to keep on the redraft radar that you didn't mention. Jalen Milroe. Like
Nice.
Darnold has shown that he could be a solid starter in the right scheme, but what if, offensive line concerns with Seattle really hurt him? Maybe they're really failing to meet expectations or 3-8 or something, and they want to see what they have with Milroe, who could just run wild. And obviously, we've seen what, questionable real life, but great in fantasy. Look at Justin Fields, could be the same Jalen Milroe. So,
Exactly.
not that you have to stash him, but keep a close eye on if he's ever given a chance to start, because that would be a intriguing waiver ad.
Yeah, if you got an extra bench spot and maybe Darnold's your quarterback and you see him starting, or even if he's not your quarterback and you see him starting to shit the bed or play really, really bad to the point where you could see him getting yanked in the next couple weeks, that's a great stash because the upside is probably like top 12.
Yeah.
Okay, Frank. Well, that does it for another tidy little episode in this new format for the True North Fantasy Pod. Hope the listeners are liking it. We're trying to keep these episodes a little bit shorter, keep them digestible in that half an hour range for the people for easy listening. Let us know what you think in the comments. Please give us a like, leave that comment, subscribe to that YouTube channel. That's the best way to show us some love. Really, really appreciate it from the people. And I think that's a good wrap on our top 24, Frank. I think, what are we going to get into next? Do we want to get into the wide receivers or the running backs? What do you think?
Let's do the running backs
All
first.
right. So next week, we're going to dive into our top 12 and I guess top 24 running back rankings. And being that the position is maybe a little more vast than the quarterback, we'll try to find a way to go a little bit deeper into the rankings than just 24 as it's warranted. But yeah, Frank, really appreciate it. Great to have you back from your trip to Italy. The Stallion is back in Canada, and we are ready to rip here on the True North Fantasy Pod. So for Frank Amaranti, I am Travis Seal. We will see you next week. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Peace.
Peace.